But the fates had other ideas, and Napoleon was to have one more roll of the dice. Landing in Gulf Juan, Napoleon had a tiny group of Poles, old guard and officers with him, no more than 1,000 men. It was a desperate gamble, and as he marched to Paris, former soldiers flocked to the Eagles, and none were as devoted to their emperor as the old guard. One story I read was of an elderly, one-legged former guardsman being found trying to drag his heavy trunk from the attic, saying that he needed to leave. His wife, concerned, asked him where he thought he was going. The man replied, his face streaked with tears, "To him." Such was the devotion Napoleon inspired, and by the time he had returned to Paris, the army had grown by the end of May to 200,000 strong, and, as always, at its centre was the old guard. Now more than ever they stood almost as demigods amongst the inexperienced army, their reputation as fearsome as their appearance, and this was not lost upon Napoleon. He raised 4 more regiments of old guard, 2 more of grenadiers, 2 more of chasseurs, but in reality it was only the 1st regiment of grenadiers à rapide and the 1st regiment, the chasseurs à rapide, that were what we would recognise as the old guard, the soldiers. These were the immortals. By the time the army arrived in Paris, the man that had accompanied Napoleon into exile, Cambronne, was now a general and a count, having taken a fort that looked to bar the way of the largely increasing French army. Now, whether it actually would have done or not is kind of irrelevant, but General Cambronne managed to do that. While the Allies declared war on Napoleon specifically, not France, they declared war on Napoleon, they executed a swift march to Brussels. While we as wargamers like our regiments to look the same, and some of us worry about the correct cut on a soldier's pockets, or the correct buttons if they're the right way up, the Army of the North was a raggedy mess. From the youngest recruits, the so-called Marie-Louises, a coat and a polachem, the sort of pillbox hat almost, were the only uniform they were given. And while the old guard were resplendent in their dress uniforms, underneath their long blue overcoats, they wore a huge variety of headgear. I personally have modelled all my old guard with their bearskins, but, you know, there's a much variation that you can do there. And once again, they formed Napoleon's reserve, a core around which victory would be achieved. They were not present at either Ligny or Quatre Bras, but on the 18th of June 1815 they formed up next to Napoleon's headquarters at La Belle Alliance, just south of Mont-Saint-Jean, near the village of Waterloo. Plenty has been written about the Battle of Waterloo, but we'll concern ourselves here with the role of the Old Guard. The lesser known part of their involvement was the defence of Plancenoit, attempting to hold the Prussian flanking force with vicious fighting in the churchyard, which it would appear is the natural habitat of the Old Guard. Eventually, however, the number of Prussians began to tell, and the 5 battalions of Old Guard that were sent to stiffen the Young Guard were forced back. The musketeers of the 25th Regiment of Prussian Foot cleared the 1st Battalion 2nd Chasseurs from Chantelet Woods. Their official regimental history records the following. Despite their great courage and stamina, the French guards fighting in the village began to show signs of wavering. The church was already on fire, with columns of red flame coming out of the windows, aisles and doors. In the village itself, still the scene of bitter house-to-house fighting, everything was burning, adding to the confusion. However, once Major von Witzelbein's manoeuvre was accomplished, and the French guards saw their flank and rear threatened, they began to withdraw. The Guard Chasseurs under General Pellet formed the rear guard. The remnants of the guard left in a great rush, leaving large masses of artillery, equipment and ammunition wagons in the wake of their retreat. The evacuation of Plancenoit led to the loss of the position that was used to cover the withdrawal of the French army to Charleroi. The guard fell back from Plancenoit in the direction of Maison du Roy and Cailloux. Unlike other parts of the battlefield, there were no cries of "Sauve Querpu!" Save yourselves here. Instead, the cry, "Sauvons nos Anglais!" Let's save our eagles, could be heard. Those not fleeing formed rally squares and fought and died. The Young Guard ended the day with a casualty rate of 97%. To the north, however, one of the most iconic moments of Napoleonic warfare was about to unfold. Not only is it one of the most iconic moments of Napoleonic warfare, it's one of the most iconic moments in military history. Seeing that both armies were punch-drunk, reeling and unsteady, requiring just one more push, Napoleon risked everything on one last gamble. He sent in the Imperial Guard. Never defeated, never having fled in the face of the enemy, the reputation of the Old Guard was one which meant they emanated an aura of victory, once referred to as the granite of the army by Napoleon. To see the Guard marching through the smoke, patachage blaring, the tricolore flying, with a whole host of their battle honours in gold emblazed on it, cries of Vive l'Empereur, was to see your doom approaching. But the Guard of 1815 was not the Guard of 1809, and while it was believed for many years that it was the 1st Regiment of Grenadier Rapide, the creme de la creme of the Old Guard, not least by their opponents and Sergei Bondarchuk, director of the film Waterloo, it was probably mounted by 5 battalions of the Middle Guard, with the Grenadiers moving up in support. Napoleon himself oversaw the initial deployment of the Middle and Old Guard. The Middle Guard formed into battalion squares, each about 550 men strong, with the 1st Battalion of the 3rd Grenadiers, led by Generals Friant and Porret de Morvan, on the right along the road. To their left and rear was General Harlay leading the square of the 4th Grenadiers, then the 1st Battalion of the 3rd Chasseurs under General Michel, next the 2nd Battalion of the 3rd Chasseurs, and finally a large single square of 2 battalions of 800 soldiers of the 4th Chasseurs, led by General Henrion. 2 batteries of Imperial Guard horse artillery accompanied them, with sections of 2 guns between the squares. Each square was led by a general, and Marshal Ney, mounted on his 5th horse of the day, led the advance. Behind them in reserve were the 3 battalions of the Old Guard. The most prestigious place was, and still is, the right of the line, and thus formed up right to left, with the most senior on the right, the 1st Battalion of the 2nd Grenadiers. In the middle was the 2nd Battalion of the 2nd Regiment of Chasseurs Rapide. On the right were the 1st of the 2nd Chasseurs, and as a final reserve behind them, the 1st Battalion of the 1st Grenadiers remained. The advance of the Guard sucked in nearby fleeing troops, ashamed to be seen as cowards beneath the gaze of those almost mythic beings. They rallied and formed scratch units, almost like a gravitational pull from the Guard, dragging the routing French with them. On the left, infantry from Riel's corps that were not still engaged with the assault on Hougomont, and his cavalry advanced. On the right, all the now rallied elements of d'Erlon's corps, even savage as they had been by the Union Brigade, once again ascended the ridge to engage the Anglo-Allied lines. Of these, Peugeot's brigade broke into skirmish order and moved north and west of La Haye-Saint, and provided fire support to Ney, once again unhorsed, and to Friant's 1st Battalion of the 3rd Grenadiers. The Guards first received fire from some Brunswick battalions, but the return fire of the Grenadiers forced them to retire. Next, Colonel Halkett's brigade, front line consisting of the 30th Regiment of Foot and the 73rd, which I think is a Highland regiment, traded fire, but they were driven back in confusion into the 33rd and the 69th Regiments. Halkett was shot in the face and seriously wounded. The whole brigade retreated as a mob. The crucial moment had come, as, seeing this, other Anglo-Allied troops began to give way. A counter-attack by the Nassauers and the remnants of Kiel-Manseg's brigade from the Anglo-Allied second line, led by the Prince of Orange himself, was also thrown back, and the Prince of Orange was seriously wounded. General Harlay brought up the 4th Grenadiers, and the Anglo-Allied centre was now in serious danger of breaking. It was at this moment that the arrival of General Chasse's relatively fresh Dutch division occurred. Led by a battery of Dutch horse artillery, they opened destructive fire onto the 1st Battalion of the 3rd Grenadiers' flank. This did not stop the Guards' advance, however, so Chassé ordered his 1st Brigade, commanded by Colonel Henrik Detmers, to charge the outnumbered French with the bayonet. The French Grenadiers then faltered and broke. The 4th Grenadiers, seeing their comrades retreat, and having suffered heavy casualties themselves, now wheeled about and retired. To the left of the 4th Grenadiers were the 2 squares of the 1st and 2nd 3rd Chasseurs, who had angled further to the west and suffered more from artillery fire than the Grenadiers. But as their advance mounted the ridge, They found it apparently abandoned and covered with dead. Victory was theirs, the road to Brussels lay open, and the glory of Napoleon would march onwards. Suddenly, however, 1,500 British foot guard under Maitland, who had been lying down to protect themselves from French artillery, stood up and devastated them with point-blank volleys. The chasseurs tried to deploy into line to answer the fire, but some 300 fell from the first volley alone, including Colonel Mallet and General Michel, and both battalion commanders. A bayonet charge by the foot guard then broke the leaderless squares, which fell back onto the following column. The 4th Chasseurs Battalion, 800 strong, now came upon the exposed battalions of British foot guards, who lost all cohesion and dashed back up to the slope as a disorganised crowd, with the chasseurs in pursuit. At the crest, the chasseurs came upon the battery that had caused severe casualties on the 1st and 2nd Battalion of the 3rd Chasseurs. They opened fire and swept away the gunners. The left flank of their square now came under fire from a heavy formation of British skirmishers, which the chasseurs drove back, but the skirmishers were replaced by the 52nd Light Infantry, led by John Colborne, which wheeled into line into the chasseurs' flank and poured a devastating fire into them. The chasseurs returned accurate fire, which killed or wounded some 150 men of the 52nd, and despite these heavy losses, the 52nd then charged. It was under this final onslaught that the chasseurs broke. The last of the guard retreated headlong. A ripple of panic passed through the French lines as the astounding news spread. La garde recule! Savez quoi pieux! The guard is retreating, every man for himself. The guard had been broken, and with it the granite backbone of the French army. If the immortals themselves could not stand against the British, then who could? The retreat became a full rout. The surviving Imperial Guard rallied on their 3 reserve battalions. I have read some sources that say 4, just south of Le Haisson for a last stand. A charge from Adams' brigade and the Hanoverian Landwehr Osnabrück battalion, plus Vivian's and Vandeleur's relatively fresh cavalry brigades to their right, threw them into confusion, and those left in semi-cohesive units retreated towards La Belle Alliance. Forming a rally square at the command of a wounded General Cambron, the old guard was surrounded by the victorious Allies. The next couple of minutes are hotly disputed, but my favourite rendition is the story is that when General Colville called on him to surrender, according to a journalist named Rougemont, Cambron replied, "La garde meurt, et ne se rend pas." The guard dies, it does not surrender. It was claimed with several witnesses in 1845 that it was actually General Claude Michel that cried these words. Another possibility, one given to Cambron by Victor Hugo and again Bondarchuk, is that Cambron's response was much less romantic. It was a single word: merde! Cambron always denied both Rougemont's account and his one-word response, stating that he could not have said such a thing and remained alive. A series of letters to the Times claimed that British Colonel Hugh Halkett, commanding the 3rd Hanoverian Brigade, captured Cambron before he could make any reply. But, let's go with the romance of it, I think. The Guard was destroyed, and with it the First Empire. Louis XVIII, once again restored to his throne, ordered the old Guard disbanded by December. And as in 1814, these veterans were dispersed. Those that remained in France were regularly reported on by secret police. A significant cadre of old Guard officers went to America, particularly the East Coast, New Orleans, and Galveston. Some arrived on the Trinity River in Texas and built Champs d'Aile near today's modern city of Moss Bluff in Liberty County. When those from Galveston and Trinity met each other, the past would come back with renewed freshness, and calls of "Vive l'Empereur" were heard around the campfires. While there was talk of a rescue of their emperor from his prison on St. Helena, their dispersion and the ravages of diseases of the area and age caused the scheme to vanish. Back in France, General Cambron was tried for treason, but, well defended by the royalist Antoine-Pierre Berryer, he was acquitted on the 26th of April 1816. He would later marry Mary Osborne, a Scottish nurse who had cared for him after the Battle of Waterloo. Despite his unfortunate trial for treason, he regained favour, and in 1820, Louis XVIII made him commandant at Lille with the rank of brigadier, and made him a viscount. He retired to his birthplace in 1823, dying there in 1842. A statue of Cambronne was erected in Nantes in 1848 with La Garde Mette et ses remparts inscribed on the plinth. Additionally, a square in Paris, La Place Cambronne, is named after him. He was buried in the cemetery Miséricorde in his home city of Nantes. And thus, I think we reach the end of the Old Guard, and with them, the end of the Napoleonic era. Both were left shattered and bloodied on the battlefield of Waterloo. But there was to be one final parade, one final review from their beloved emperor. In 1840, Napoleon's body was returned to France. Every so often, as the coffin made its way to Paris, it would pass a solitary figure. In a faded blue surtout, a patched long blue coat, and a moth-eaten bearskin, the stooped old man would momentarily stand straight-backed, and mime presenting arms, the movements as fluid as if the passage of 25 years had fallen away, as the Grognard, the old guardsman, the immortal, saluted his emperor one last time. So there it is, the story of one of the most famous units in military history, and certainly the one I know that draws a lot of people to Napoleonic wargaming, the Old Guard. So let's look at them in black powder. Now, as befits their status, they are incredibly strong in black powder. They have a higher hand-to-hand value than infantry regiments. They have tough fighter. They are elite 3+. Which is crazy. They also have a 3+ morale save, and they have an extra point of stamina. They are nails. Now they're they're also reliable as well. The true awesomeness of them comes about to do with their stamina. Now, they can't easily be disordered because they are elite 3+. So 2/3 of the time, they are going to recover from being disordered and fight on as normal. Now, you can whittle down their numbers, but they've got a 3+ save. In column of attack, they get +1 to that, so they have a 2+ save, and they ignore disorder on a 3+. They are absolutely hench. I cannot overemphasize how strong Old Guard are. That is, unless you're me. The first time I ever used them in a game, I issued a brigade order. The Old Guard will advance. Rolled a double 6 and then rolled a 2, so they all moved off the table. Fortunately, they did come back on again, and were quite powerful. But yeah, try and avoid doing the blunders if you can with them. They really are a really strong number of units that you can anchor your battle lines with. And we've seen they can be used in one of two ways. They can either be used as a grenadier reserve, similar to you would with Austrians or Russians. You use them as a brigade in their own right, and they crack on like that, and they do their thing. Or, as we saw at Austerlitz, and maybe a bit later on, they were spread out throughout the army just to stiffen the line a little bit as well. So you can, as a, if you're bothered about the historicalness of these things, just use a single battalion, or maybe have a small or medium-sized unit, and just say, well, Napoleon has sent this unit to ensure that this brigade carries on fighting and carries on doing what it's supposed to be doing. So that's really the two ways that you can use them. In the rules themselves, there's no distinction between the chasseurs and the grenadiers, and I think that's right. I don't think there's really any military distinction between the two. Obviously, the grenadiers were a little more elite, I guess you could say, and that's purely just from their self-belief. So I guess you could maybe give them an extra bonus. Personally, I wouldn't. I don't think they would be different enough to warrant that. But I think the Old Guard are very, very well represented by black powder. Normally, you get a sort of +2 to morale or +1 for Old Guard. Normally, you get something. They're normally regarded as being better than, say, the British Foot Guards. And I think in 1815, I think that's a very dubious claim to make. Earlier on, I think they're probably as good. They're probably the best soldiers in the world during the years of glory, if I'm honest. Certainly up to 1812. But after the retreat from Moscow, if you're going to use the first battalions of the first Chasseurs, 1st Grenadiers. Yep, absolutely. I think they're probably some of the best troops in the world. But the rest of them, yeah, I mean, I said in the video, I think it was on the Young Guard, I said there's an argument to say that they should actually have better stats than Middle Guard and Old Guard because they saw a lot more action. But, you know, I think there's something to be said for the reputation of the Old Guard having an effect in the game itself as well. Something that I would be tempted to do is maybe if you're in combat, you get your supports for flank and rear. I think maybe if you've got Grenadiers or Chasseurs from the Old Guard that is supporting you, that could perhaps count as +2 to your combat res instead of the regular +1. I think that would really help with the idea of them as a thickening agent. Another one you could do would be if they're within 6 inches, you could re-roll your morale tests or something like that. I think that might be a little bit strong. I think the +2 for having them as a support would be better personally, but you know, it's entirely up to you. We looked here, it's sort of like woven into this video, was a bit of a Napoleonic figures story as well with General Cambron. So I don't think there's specifically rules for him in Black Powder Albion Triumphant 2. I haven't actually got it with me at the moment. This is sort of a little bit off the cuff. I don't think there is. I would recommend that they get to re-roll their first morale roll that would take them to a 4 or less. I think that could be quite good. They could also count as being in square for the purposes of morale if he's attached to a unit, perhaps. But personally, yeah, I think they get to re-roll their first result that would end in a 4 or less. So, yeah, that's after modifiers. I think they may still run away, but I think that brings in his most famous exploit with the guard dies, it does not surrender. So, that's been it. I hope you've enjoyed the video. I am sorry that it's been a while getting out, and I'm hoping that at over an hour, I hope that it's got everything you want from the Old Guard. Please, please, please leave some comments down below. What's your favourite thing about the Guard? Have you got your own units of Guard? Haven't really gone into manufacturers, but just a very quick shout out to Victrix. Is one of the few sets that I would say absolutely, hands down, it's an incredible set. No one else really does Plastic Guard, to be honest. But no, the Victrix ones are really, really nice. That's what I've got. You'll have seen some pictures of my Old Guard throughout the video. But the Perrys, they do a lovely set as well. I particularly like the ones who are at rest. But no, so figures-wise, the Old Guard, there's more than you can shake a stick at. And General Cambron, I'm not sure if he's got a specific mini. I'll have to research this as I'm putting the visuals together for the video. But that's it on the series of Napoleon's Imperial Guard. I hope you've enjoyed it. As I said earlier on, I may do an appendix video on artillery, sailors, engineers, things like that. But that's going to be sort of as and when I get around to it. And content's quite sporadic at the moment anyway. Please stay tuned to the channel this week. On Monday, I will be visiting the German Army Museum in Dresden. Now, I'm not 100% sure what I'm going to see there, but I'm hoping to upload some pictures, perhaps some video. I'm not really sure how it's going to work, so don't hold me to anything. But certainly, in the next couple of weeks, I'll be uploading a load of pictures onto the Facebook page, so join that if you haven't already. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. There's loads of videos like this on there. I'm going to link a couple more videos from the Guard series at the end of this video. So please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Please give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. If you didn't, well, thank you very much for staying with it this long. And I hope to see you in the very near future on our next video. Thank you very much. Goodbye.